I used to think having a toxic boss was just part of being an adult, something you complained about over drinks, laughed off, and then showed up for on Monday anyway. I told myself that everyone had a Mark in their life. The guy who made too much money to be questioned and yelled just enough to stay scary, but not enough to get fired. I was wrong about that, and I only realized it because of one morning at the airport. Officially, I'm a project manager at a mid-sized consulting firm. Unofficially, I'm the person who makes everyone else look prepared. Decks, numbers, timelines, talking points. If it's the boring backbone of some big, shiny presentation, it usually lives on my laptop at 3 in the morning. Mark had been my direct manager for 2 years. On paper, he was exactly the type the partners loved. Ex-Big Four, tall, confident, fluent in bullet points. Around clients and senior leadership, he could turn on the charm like a switch. Calm, charismatic, strategic. Behind closed meeting room doors, he was different. He never threw things, never raised his voice loud enough for HR to hear. He just leaned forward, lowered his tone, and spoke in a way that felt like someone pushing your head underwater. "You're making me look stupid. Do you even understand the numbers you're putting in these slides? If I have to fix this again, I'll find someone who can actually handle responsibility." Always one-on-one, no witnesses. From the hallway, all anyone ever saw was frosted glass and silhouettes, and nobody hears humiliation through triple-pane windows. We all knew what he was like. We joked about it in our team chat, the way people joke about things they're not ready to confront. "How was the sermon? Survive your Mark review?" That kind of thing. Once, after one of his talks, I came back to my desk pale and quiet. Our senior analyst Lena slid a Snickers across to me with a sticky note. "For low blood sugar and emotional damage." We laughed. Then we went right back to work. The company loved to pretend it was progressive. Code of conduct, mandatory trainings on psychological safety, a confidential ethics hotline. The document said all the right things. No bullying, no harassment, no retaliation for reporting. I'd checked the little onboarding box that said I have read and understood, and filed the whole thing mentally under PR theater. I never thought any of it would matter. The project that finally pushed things over the edge was a big one. A global logistics company launching a multi-year digital transformation, the kind of contract that got mentioned during all-hands meetings. Mark was the engagement lead. I ran day-to-day delivery. If we nailed the first steering committee session, we were basically locked in for the next 3 years. 3 weeks before the trip, Mark became impossible. A comma in the wrong place. A number not rounded the way he liked. A slide title that didn't sound strategic enough. The closer we got to the flight, the shorter his fuse grew. The Sunday night before departure, he messaged me on Teams at 11:37 p.m. "Why is slide 17 still using last week's volume assumptions?" I stared at the screen. I'd already updated them. Sent 3 versions, each with different scenarios. I replied anyway. "They're the new ones. Same figures as in the file you approved an hour ago. Check the footer timestamp." The typing bubbles appeared, vanished, appeared again. "We'll talk tomorrow, 7:15 a.m. at the airport. Don't be late." I knew that tone. I shut my laptop and lay staring at the ceiling until my alarm went off at 5. Our flight left at 8:40 from the main terminal. I arrived at 7:05, because if I was going to get chewed out, I wanted caffeine in my bloodstream first. The terminal hummed with that familiar chaos. Rolling suitcases, half-awake announcements, children already crying. I found our gate and headed over. Lena was already there, hunched around a paper cup, hoodie up, dark circles under her eyes. Next to her sat Josh, our data guy, laptop balanced on his knees, already tweaking something in Excel. "Morning," Lena muttered. "You look like you slept exactly as much as I did." "Mark texted you too?" I asked. She winced. "Midnight message. Make sure your charts actually say something." I almost replied, "Maybe your leadership should too." We both knew we wouldn't. Our junior, Priya, arrived a few minutes later, dragging her carry-on and apologizing for being 3 minutes late, even though none of us were late at all. Everyone was there except Mark. He walked up at 7:32. No coffee, phone to his ear, suit perfectly pressed. That expression of someone who already knew who was responsible for their bad mood. "Yeah, if we lose this contract, it won't be on me," he said into the phone as he passed us without even nodding. "No, I'll handle it. I always do." He ended the call, pocketed the phone, and finally looked at us. "Deck," he said to me instead of hello, holding out his hand. I already had the laptop open. I showed him the latest version, walked him through the updated forecasts, the charts, the narrative structure. He nodded silently while scrolling. When he reached slide 17, his jaw tightened. "These numbers," he said. "You're sure?" "Yes," I answered, cross-checked against the client's latest Friday data dump. Warehouse 3 shows a minor variance, but it's within the tolerance we agreed on last week. He flipped forward, then back again to slide 17. "You'd better be right," he muttered. "If they start poking holes in this, I'm not taking that hit." That wasn't new. With Mark, responsibility was always a hot potato. Passed upward, downward, sideways, anywhere but his hands. At AITA, the departures board flashed. Flight 2645 to Chicago. Delayed. New departure. 9:20 a.m. The gate area groaned collectively. Phones came out. A few people swore under their breath. Mark exhaled sharply, as if the airplane had personally betrayed him. "Perfect," he said. "The client's already edgy. Now this." He stepped aside to text one of the partners, muttering quietly, "Yeah, we're delayed, but I'll keep them warm. Still making the afternoon slot." Then he turned back to us. "All right, use the time. Go through your sections again. I don't want anyone stumbling." We spread out. I took a seat near the window and reopened my laptop, though my eyes kept drifting over the crowd. Business travelers in identical jackets, families clutching neck pillows, people in headphones staring blankly into nowhere. And in the middle of all that noise, our tiny team, our tiny corporate drama, which still felt at that moment like just another exhausting morning. Lena slid closer and leaned toward me. "By the way," she whispered, pretending to check her phone, "if he starts again today, I'm done. I mean it. There's only so many times you can be spoken to like you're 12. "He won't," I said automatically. "Not here. Not in public." The funny thing is, I believed it. Mark always kept the mask on outside meeting rooms. He could be sharp, passive-aggressive, condescending, but outright blowing up in front of strangers? No, that stuff was reserved for behind closed doors. Lena shook her head. "You saw him last week," she said quietly. "That one-on-one with Paul? Door closed, but everyone heard him. He's slipping." She was right. For the first time, he'd lost volume control as well as temper. The executive mask had cracked. The loudspeaker announced a gate change for another flight. A child began to cry. Someone dropped a water bottle that clattered against the floor. Just a normal airport morning. Too much light, too many people, not enough sleep. At 8:40, Mark regrouped us again. "Client emailed," he said, holding up his phone. "They want heavier emphasis on cost savings. Slides 17, 18, 19, those are now the stars." He looked directly at me. "If there's any surprise in those numbers, that's on you," he said. "Understood?" I nodded, not because I agreed, but because making a scene among hundreds of travelers wasn't going to help anyone. "Understood." He held my gaze for one more second, like he was checking whether I might push back. Then he turned to Lena to ask something about visuals. I inhaled slowly and let it out, pretending my only concern was formatting. Around us I heard the scrape of queue barriers, laughter drifting from someone's phone, another delay announcement echoing across the terminal. What I didn't know yet was that the people surrounding our gate were about to become unwilling witnesses to something none of us ever expected to hear in a public place. The board over our gate flickered. The word delayed, updating again with a new departure time. Mark glanced at it, then back at me. His lips pressed into a thin line, and somewhere between that second and the next, I felt the strange shift. The sticky, heavy sensation when the atmosphere changes before anything actually happens. Like the way the sky still looks blue just before a storm, when you don't see the damage yet, but you know it's coming. I didn't think he'd actually do it. Not there, not in an airport full of strangers with nowhere to look but at us. But when the delay ticked up again, 09:45. Now, something in Mark finally snapped. It started quietly, the way most explosions do. He was staring at his phone, jaw clenched, scrolling through an email I couldn't see. I heard him mutter, "Unbelievable," under his breath. Then he turned toward me, and the shift in the air was immediate. You know that moment when a crowd goes silent without actually going silent? When you suddenly register every sound because you're waiting for one voice to rise above it? That was the moment. "Can I ask you something?" he said. His tone was deceptively calm, like a parent about to scold a kid for breaking something expensive. "Sure," I answered, already bracing myself. "Did you actually review the numbers for slide 17? Across the aisle, Lena froze mid-sip of her coffee. Josh stopped typing. Priya looked up from her planner. Mark wasn't whispering, he wasn't shouting yet either, but he was speaking loudly enough that the couple across from us looked up over their newspapers. "Yes," I said. "I reviewed them 3 times. They're pulled directly from the client's latest file." He chuckled, that condescending, dismissive half-laugh that managers master the way magicians master sleight of hand. 3 times, he repeated, and yet the client says they don't match what they provided on Friday. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. They do match. I verified. He cut me off with a sharp raise of his hand. "Don't," he said. "Don't start making excuses." His voice grew sharper, louder. Heads turned. People shifted in their seats, pretending not to listen, but very much listening. "Do you have any idea," he continued, "how incompetent it makes me look when you can't get something as basic as numbers right?" "I got them right," I said, still keeping my voice low. "If there's a mismatch, I can check." "You should have checked before today," he snapped. That was it. The snap. The change from irritation to full-volume humiliation was instant. His voice ricocheted off the terminal walls, cutting through the airport chatter like a blade. "We are about to walk into the single most important meeting of the quarter," he hissed, "and you are putting the entire thing at risk. Do you understand that?" Every pair of eyes around us locked onto him, then onto me. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I stayed still. I didn't defend myself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give him anything he could twist later. He wasn't done. "You think this is acceptable?" he shouted. "You think I'm going to stand in front of the partners and take the fall for your mistakes?" "Mark?" "No," he barked. "You don't get to mark me right now. You messed up. And if we lose this client, you won't have to worry about flying out next time, because you won't be on this team anymore." A few people actually winced. One woman mouthed, "Wow." A businessman across from us shook his head slowly, like even he couldn't believe what he was hearing, and then something subtle but important happened. Lena reached for her phone, not fast, not dramatic, just a small, quiet motion. Unlocking it, lowering it behind her bag, camera pointed in Mark's direction. She didn't meet my eyes. She didn't have to. We'd all joked about recording him someday. I never thought anyone actually would. He kept going. "You're supposed to be a project manager," he scoffed. "Act like it for once. Stop expecting everyone else to fix your messes." That part almost made me laugh. If anyone in the company specialized in dumping messes on other people, it was him. But I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. The worst part wasn't the yelling. It was the way the team watched. Not because they agreed with him, but because they were helpless. They'd all been on the receiving end of his anger. They all knew exactly what this felt like. And they all knew that interrupting him would only make things worse. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough to hide the venom. If you weren't so busy proving your stash reliable, maybe you'd do your job. Reliable. The word hit harder than the shouting. That was the one thing I prided myself on. The thing he couldn't take from me behind closed doors. Until now. He straightened up, exhaled sharply, and snapped. Fix the damn numbers. They're already correct, I repeated quietly. That's when he lost it completely. Are you calling me a liar? People actually stopped walking. A TSA agent turned his head. Someone in the row behind us muttered, Jesus Christ. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. He shook his head like I'd insulted him personally. I swear to God, if you embarrass me in front of that client, don't bother coming back. You hear me? Don't come back. He grabbed his bag and stormed toward the windows, pretending to check the runway. But the damage was already done. The entire gate was silent in that heavy, uncomfortable way that told me everyone had been listening. For a moment, I just sat there, palms cold, heartbeat too slow. I felt something between humiliation and clarity pulling at me. Lena slid into the seat next to mine. She didn't say sorry. She didn't tell me to ignore him. She simply turned her phone slightly toward me. Just enough for me to see the red recording dot still glowing. But that was just the beginning. I didn't know it yet. But what happened next would turn that recording into something much more than a team joke or a private memory. It would become evidence. When we finally boarded the plane, Mark walked ahead of us like nothing had happened. He made small talk with the flight attendant, joked about the delay, even smiled. It was surreal, like he'd taken off one face and put on another mid-stride. I chose an aisle seat near the back. Lena sat across from me, Josh behind her, Priya 2 rows up. Mark was in business class, far from the people he'd just exploded at. Of course he was. For the first 20 minutes of the flight, I stared at the safety card without seeing any of the drawings. My mind kept replaying his voice, not the words, but the volume, the sheer disproportionate force behind them. Every shout felt like it had left a bruise. As soon as we hit cruising altitude, I opened my laptop and pulled up the client's data file. I checked every number again, then a third time. Nothing was wrong. There was nothing to fix. I sat back, my jaw tightening. Humiliation was one thing, but humiliation built on a lie, on his assumptions, his panic, his need to lash out. That was something else. When the announcement came to prepare for landing, Lena leaned across the aisle and whispered, "You know HR is going to want that recording, right?" I inhaled slowly. "If I give it to them, it's my word against his. You know how this goes. They'll make it a miscommunication." "Not just your word," she said. "Mine, Priya's, Josh's. That won't be enough to take him down." She hesitated, then said the sentence that shifted everything. "There's audio on the airport cameras." I stared at her. "No way, seriously." "My cousin works in airport operations," she murmured. "He's told me before, at some big terminals, the gate area mics pick up ambient sound for incident reviews. They don't store it forever, but long enough." I didn't breathe for a few seconds. "If HR requests the footage," she continued, "and if he ranted that loudly, there's a chance they caught at least part of it." A chance. That was all I needed. When we landed and took the car to the client's office, Mark was in full performance mode again. He held court in the back seat, outlining talking points, reframing strategy, pretending the meltdown never happened. "We're going to nail this," he said. "Just follow my lead." I didn't respond. I was too busy watching the city pass by the window and thinking about that red recording dot on Lena's phone. At the office, we went straight into the meeting. Mark was smooth, polished, confident. When it came time for me to present, he gave me a sharp nod. His way of saying, "Don't screw this up." I didn't. The numbers were accurate. The story made sense. The client approved everything without pushing back once. At the end, they even complimented the clarity of the analysis. Mark accepted the praise like he'd created the entire deck himself. Afterward, as we left the conference room, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. Too hard, like he wanted people to see him being supportive. "Nice save," he said. "See? When you try, you can deliver." I stepped out of his reach. That night in the hotel, with my room dim and quiet, I watched the recording. Not because I wanted to relive it, because I needed to understand it. I watched Mark lean forward, watched the vein in his neck tighten, watched his hands slice the air with each accusation. I listened to him raise his voice so loudly that even the family at the next table turned to stare. The video didn't exaggerate, it didn't interpret, it didn't editorialize. It documented, clearly, objectively. I typed the email slowly, deliberately. To HR business partner. Subject: formal complaint. Workplace conduct incident at airport. I described exactly what happened. The time, the gate number, the witnesses, our team, and at least a dozen bystanders. I attached the video. I quoted our own code of conduct. I explained that this wasn't an isolated issue, but the first one with hard proof. I hovered over send for a long moment. Then I clicked. HR responded the next morning. They thanked me. They asked for availability for a formal interview. They confirmed they were requesting the official airport footage through the legal department. And then came the line that made my pulse shift. "We have received prior concerns regarding Mark's conduct. Your documentation is extremely helpful." I read that sentence 3 times. I wasn't the first. Just the first to have evidence. Later that day, Mark walked into the client's office wearing the same confident smile. But something about him felt off. Sharp, reactive, brittle around the edges. Maybe he sensed something shifting. Maybe it was projection, or maybe he'd yelled at someone else that morning. During lunch, HR called me. I stepped outside to answer. "Thank you for submitting the report," the HR partner said. "We've reviewed the video. It's concerning." She said, "Concerning," the way doctors say, "We found something on the scan." "We also received the airport audio file," she continued. My breath caught. "It corroborates your account. We'll be conducting interviews with the team when you return." I looked back through the glass wall at Mark, laughing with the client's COO. A man performing stability while the ground under him slowly shifted. "When we return?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "We'll speak with you first." And in that moment, that tiny, sharp, electric moment, something turned inside me. Not triumph, not revenge, just the first feeling of actual, tangible fairness. They thought the airport scene would fade as soon as we boarded that plane. They thought it was just another day. They had no idea it had already turned into evidence. 3 days later, when our trip wrapped and we were back at the office, HR summoned us one by one. Not abruptly, not dramatically, professionally, quietly, the way real accountability usually starts. I was the first to be called. The HR business partner, Meredith, met me in a small conference room. Glass walls, neutral carpet, pitcher of water on the table. The usual corporate attempt to make serious conversations feel less surgical. "Yeah, thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was steady, unhurried. "I want to walk through everything that happened at the airport. We have the recording you submitted, and we've reviewed the airport audio. We're now gathering witness statements." She didn't look shocked. She didn't look impressed. She looked prepared. Like this wasn't the first time Mark's name had crossed her desk. We went through the incident minute by minute. She asked for context. The project stress, the chain of emails, the history of one-on-one outbursts. Every detail had a place. Every fact had weight. Nothing was hand-waved away. When she finished her questions, she folded her hands. "This was not acceptable workplace behavior," she said simply, "and it was not an isolated event." There it was. Validation, not emotional, not dramatic, but factual. The kind that matters. Later that day, Lena had her interview. Then Josh. Then Priya. None of them exaggerated. None of them performed. They just told the truth. What they heard, what they saw, how often it had happened behind closed doors. By the second day, the investigation had momentum. Quiet, structured, unstoppable. HR requested documentation from previous managers. They reviewed exit interviews from former team members. Small patterns started aligning into a single, undeniable one. The mini-hook came naturally. Mark didn't know yet that the company had already moved past fact-finding and into decision-making. He walked through the office like nothing had changed, greeted people, complained about travel delays, sent long emails full of backhanded praise. But every time he passed someone from our team, their eyes dropped just a little too quickly. He could feel the shift, even if he didn't know the cause. 2 days later, HR scheduled a meeting with him. Not a check-in, not a coaching conversation, a formal conduct review. He didn't tell us, of course, but we recognized the signs. The partners calling him in a closed room, the tight expression when he came out, the way he avoided eye contact afterward. By the end of the week, he was temporarily reassigned pending completion of the internal review. In corporate language, that's the first step toward removal. A company doesn't sideline a lead on a multi-million-dollar contract unless they're preparing for impact. The micro-catharsis arrived quietly. For the first time since joining the company, the office felt safe. Not perfect, not paradise, but breathable. HR met with me again on Friday afternoon. We're concluding the investigation, Meredith said. We've determined there was a pattern of behavior inconsistent with our leadership expectations. Pattern, not moment, not lapse. Pattern. Effective Monday, Mark will no longer be overseeing your team. He's being transitioned into a non-managerial role. He'll retain employment for now, but he won't be supervising staff or client accounts. I nodded slowly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't a TV-style firing with security escorting him out. It was something much more powerful, a consequence he couldn't spin, talk his way out of, or offload onto someone else. And you, she continued, will be reassigned under a different director. We've also reviewed your performance independently of this situation. Multiple leaders have advocated for you. We'd like to offer you a step-up role, senior project manager, effective next month. Not a consolation prize, not pity, a recognition, a role I had earned long before the airport incident, but one that was finally unblocked because the person standing on my neck professionally was no longer in the way. When I left the room, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, centered, like something inside me had finally aligned after months of grinding out of place. The real finale came a week later on another early morning business trip. Different project, different team, different leader who actually treated people like people. We were walking toward our gate when someone behind me said my name in a voice I barely recognized. I turned. Mark stood a few yards away, alone, holding a coffee he didn't seem to be drinking. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just hollowed out, like he'd finally noticed the echo left behind when no one laughs at your jokes or fears your temper. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, an apology, a justification, maybe even a denial, but nothing came out, just silence, the same silence he'd never allowed anyone else to have. I nodded politely, nothing more, and walked past him with my new team. No dramatic monologue, no revenge speech, no gloating, just distance, the kind you earn. As we reached our gate, Lena, now on the new project too, glanced back. Was that? Yeah, I said. You okay? I looked ahead at the morning light coming through the terminal glass. People boarding, people leaving, lives moving in every direction but backward. Yeah, I said, I'm good. Because the truth was simple. I didn't ruin his career. He did. All I did was stop carrying the blame for it, and that, the quiet, steady, grounded certainty of it, was the real ending, the kind that doesn't leave questions, the kind that actually lets you move on.